Hello, this is the Waygookin from WaygookinWay.com. WaygookinWay.com is my personal website where I blog about pretty much all things Korean, whether it's talking about moving to Korea, things that have happened in Korea to some people, or just general questions about Korean language and culture. You can find all the information that I have available on my website, WaygookinWay.com. That's WaygookinWay.com. This is episode 2 of my podcast. And if you listened to episode 1, thank you very much for doing so. Episode 1 was about myself and the questions I get asked the most. And so this episode will be broken up pretty much into 2 parts, and it deals with moving to Korea. And so for this episode, I'm going to talk more about just moving in general, which is something that I'm working towards, and why you would want to visit Korea before you decide to move there. A lot of people look for a job, go to Korea, and after going there, not having been there before, they don't last even a year. And so that's the last thing you want to do, especially if you're on a teaching contract. Then you shoot yourself in the foot if you wanted to go back to Korea at a later time. So dealing with that this episode. The next episode is going to be dealing more with prepping for moving to Korea. What things that I have, what things I'm looking to get in order to prepare myself for moving to Korea. And so let's go into the job portion. And so if you've read my blogs at WaygookinWay.com, you realize that I've talked a lot about different scams, some information that I've posted on visas for going to Korea, what the process is like for that. And as I mentioned before, a lot of times people go to Korea and they haven't visited before, and they start working and run into many problems. So why are you wanting to go to Korea first? See what it's like and then decide if you're going to move there or not. Here's a few reasons you may want to consider. So if you're looking to go to Korea as an English teacher, then there's a couple of programs for English teachers. First off, in order for you to be hired as an English teacher, you need to have a bachelor's degree, and you need to have a certificate for teaching English to other people as either a foreign or a second language. You also have to pass a criminal background check, which if you're in the United States is an FBI background check, and submit all of that before you're able to gain employment. So for teaching, there's 2 main programs. One, if you want to work in the Seoul area. The second is if you want to work outside of Seoul. And so, part of the reason you want to visit Korea before applying for these programs is you want to see what life is like in Seoul and outside of Seoul. Because life can be totally different in the Korean countryside than it would be inside the city of Seoul. So, for a lot of people, they prefer the city of Seoul as a destination, but what is it like there? Part of it depends on where you are in Seoul. So, many people are familiar with Gangnam area. Gangnam is an area that is south of the Han River, and most people are familiar with it from the song Gangnam Style from Psy. Gangnam is a richer area. You have many important offices that are in Gangnam. Not all of the major offices in Seoul are in Gangnam, but quite a few. Few famous people live in the Gangnam area also. So if you're in Gangnam, it's going to be a much richer area. If you're north of the river or in a different part of Seoul, like say Dobong-gu, then things would be different. So Seoul is divided up into different areas called gus. So you have Gangnam-gu, Dobong-gu, Jongno-gu. So that's what those areas are called. They're called gus. And so depending upon where you're at, that determines income level, what rent is like, what things are going to be available to you, and things of that nature. Part of that will be important because many people that live in Seoul that are moving there as a foreign resident do not get their Korean driver's license right away. And you'd have to surrender your American driver's license or whatever country you're coming from. You would have to surrender your license in order to get one in Korea typically. So if you don't have a driver's license for Korea, then how do you get around? You get around via walking, bus, subway, or taxi service most of the time. And so for some people, if you're in an area that does not have great public transportation, the idea of taking the subway every day could be a little bit scary, or maybe being on a bus. If you watch other videos and blogs and vlogs, you may hear some stories about the buses taking off all of a sudden before people sit down, taking turns kind of sharply, which can be true sometimes. And definitely the subway will take off all of a sudden because the subway's on a tight schedule. So if you're not finding a seat quickly or something to hold on to, then that could be a little nerve-wracking for some. So if you're somebody who has never ridden on a subway, never ridden a city bus, you're not familiar with public transportation, or you're nervous about it, then definitely you would want to visit Korea to see if you can handle that being in Seoul. If you're looking in an area outside of Seoul, if you're in a major city like Suwon, Busan, then you may still be okay, but you may decide that you need to get a vehicle to get around. So, knowing what the street conditions are and things of that nature would be a big, big thing that I would recommend you finding out before deciding you're going to move to Korea and you're going to live outside of Seoul. Also, if you decide to live outside of Seoul, but you have to take care of business in Seoul, how easy is it for you to get to Seoul? How fast is it for you to get to Seoul? These are things that you're going to want to see. As far as visiting, you would also have opportunity to visit apartments in different areas. So, one thing you can do, you can go on Craigslist, you can see apartments for rent and get an idea of what area you may want to live in. Now, are the information that you see on Craigslist always 100% accurate? Not really, but it will give you a good indication of how much you would pay to live in a certain area. And rent is determined a lot of times by how close an apartment is to different things. So, how close is it to a subway line? How close is it to a bus terminal? How close is it to different restaurants and things like that, especially in the Seoul area? The closer you are to a subway line, that's where most people want to live because they can have a short walk to the subway if there's yellow dust or if it's wintertime or if it's monsoon season. So definitely visiting Korea will give you a better indication about that. Could you handle walking every day and walking a long distance, perhaps, in order to get to a bus or a subway? That would be another thing that you want to consider if you're in the Seoul area. If you're going to try to go somewhere like Busan, is the public transportation there good enough for you, or would you want a vehicle? That would be something that you would only know beforehand by visiting before you go and apply and try to get to Korea. As far as food goes, Some people have very little experience with Korean food, or they can find the Korean food different in Korea than they would in the United States. So, for some people, if you're in an area with a small Korean population but a heavy military population, it's been known that some restaurants in that area use a lot of MSG. MSG adds sodium, it boosts flavor, so people think it tastes really good. But Korean food in Korea doesn't have the MSG in it, so it'll taste different. Also, there's more options for Korean food in Korea. So there's Korean blood sausage. Would you be willing to eat that or not? Live octopus, things of that nature. When you're in Korea and you're able to see what restaurants are like, things of that nature, different food options. And yes, there are things like McDonald's and Burger King and Starbucks and Pizza Hut, but they have different things on the menu as well. So, are you going to be able to handle the food situation in Korea? For at least the past 4 years, I would say, there have been a lot of people who have said that it is cheaper for a person who is single to eat out for every meal instead of buying groceries and cooking for every meal. Now that might seem backwards, but a lot of Korean stores have stuff that's more designed for families because it's still kind of a new thing that a person lives by themselves in Korea. So buying a lot of groceries could end up in a lot of food being wasted, being spoiled. So that's why a number of people eat out. Also, trash is done differently in Korea because you have more recycling. So definitely, would you be able to handle that? Or if you visit a lot of apartments, you'll see sometimes where there's a stove and what looks like the oven could actually be a washing machine. So if you're somebody who cooks a lot and you're used to cooking stuff in the oven, you may end up with an apartment that doesn't have an oven in it. Could you handle a situation like that? Some people's bathroom do not have a tub. The shower head is above the toilet and there's a drain in the floor. So you stand by the toilet and you take your shower. Could you handle a situation like that? Some people with apartments like that get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and the floor is wet from taking a shower. Again, could you handle that? Some people in their apartments have a washing machine, but they don't have a dryer. That means you need to use fabric softener and you have to hang up your clothes when you're done washing them. Are you used to that? Could you handle that? If not, if any of these things would be a problem, then you may want to think twice about moving to Korea. But how you adapt to it really will depend on you and your willingness to make changes. How about going out to eat at a restaurant, but you have to take off your shoes in the entryway of the restaurant? Taking off your shoes before you go into someone's apartment. Things of that nature. Could you live in an apartment? If you lived in a house your whole life, then living in an apartment could be a totally different experience, and apartments in Korea can be totally different than apartments in North America. These are things that people typically do not think about, but if you're really going to be serious about going to Korea, you want to think about these things. So definitely, I would suggest, before just hopping on a plane after applying for a job and thinking you're going to go to Korea and you're going to be fine, you can live there, I would say visit Korea, determine where you want to live, determine if you can handle things before you ask someone to sponsor a visa. Just as a brief overview with visas, work visas typically last for a minimum of 1 year. So you're looking at a 1 year commitment. If you're teaching and you skip out on your contract, because you just can't take it, you're too homesick, you want to go home, you probably won't be able to go back and teach in Korea again. And so you do want to keep that in mind, the homesick factor. And I say that specifically with teaching because so many people hear about if you go to Korea, then they'll pay for your plane ticket, they'll pay for your rent, and you can just save up money, pay off your student debts, things of that nature. Some of that is very true, but a lot of people just decide they can't handle it. So it's better to know beforehand than to get into a situation that you simply cannot deal with. So that would be my suggestion. Visit Korea before moving there. The other thing you need to know with work visas, and I'll go into detail about this in another episode, but the visa has to come from your own consulate. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you cannot go to Korea, get a job, and start working and get a work visa there. The work visa has to come, if you're an American citizen, from a Korean consulate in the United States. So don't get tricked into thinking you can just show up in Korea, somebody can hire you, you'll get a work visa while you're there, and everything will be fine. You'll get into legal trouble that way. And as I said, I'll cover that in the future in another video. But there are options. A lot of times when you're looking for a job, you'll just see stuff in Seoul, unless you're looking at teaching English, and then you'll see all types of options that will pop up for being an English teacher. But make sure you can handle things. Make sure you're willing to give that 1 year commitment before applying. And just, if you can, visit. Make sure everything's going to be good. That way you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting an employer's time, and things will run smoothly. So those are just some tips on moving to Korea from the point of view of making sure things will be good for you. Korea is a humid climate as well because it's a peninsula. So if you can't deal with humidity very well, that might not be the place for you. Also, a lot of places that are older do not have central air conditioning or central heating like you have in North America. So during the winter time, that might pose a problem for you. During the summertime, a lot of people have small fans or they carry around a hand fan and fan themselves off. Many men wipe their brow with a handkerchief. Can you honestly deal with stuff like that? Just some things for you to think about. As always, if you have any questions or any topics that you want me to cover, you can email me. My email address is contact@WaygookinWay.com. Again, that's contact@WaygookinWay.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you again later. Remember, the best way to get rid of your nightmares is to live out your dreams. Bye-bye.